Hello, and welcome to the Brand Storytelling live streams for August 26, 2020. I'm Drew Parkhill. Thanks for being with us. These live streams air every Wednesday, and our mission is to deliver the most timely and relevant information for our group of brand storytellers and their partners. These shows are designed for you, so please let us know how we can best up the ante with more guests and topics that would help you as well as into the future. You can drop me a line. I'm Drew at BrandStorytelling.tv. Happy to welcome our guests today. John Carl joining us from Ben. He's the Vice President of Strategy and Business Development, as well as Matt Pat, also known as Matthew Patrick, from the Game Theorists, the Film Theorists, Food Theorists, and the largest live streaming channel, GT Live. Hey guys, how you doing?
Fantastic.
Doing great. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, welcome. Well, thanks so much for joining us. And I'd love to just dig right in here. There's a lot to cover off on, and as far as games and culture and YouTube and all kinds of stuff. But right now I'd like to just sort of jump in talking about sort of the moment before. We talked about this on our prep call of there's sort of that life before March 2020, and there's the life that we're living right now. Let's talk about influencer marketing and where we were headed, at the beginning of 2020 versus where we are now. I'll throw this to you first, John. Like, where do you think we were going right now, with influencer marketing at the beginning of 2020 versus, in this sort of post-COVID world?
Right. What's kind of funny is as the year was starting, I was already thinking about events that were going to be happening this year and topics that I wanted to cover. And I had already started saying that 2020 was going to very much be an inflection year for the way creators work with brands. We started seeing some pretty big shifts in the way some of the early companies that were in the influencer space were working. And then this rush of new companies starting, as well as traditional advertisers who had, been more on the media side, starting to experiment with custom content. So we were already hitting this point where things were shifting. COVID forced us to move that in a little bit of a more rapid pace because there were so many times where somebody would have media buys against the NFL, for example, and then as soon as they had no NFL to in their future to watch, they were like, well, what are we going to do? How are we going to spend our money? And the influencers were the only ones who were making new content. And it was a great way for this side to prove ourselves and showcase this is what digital can do in terms of bringing value for you. And, people like Matt Pat and other creators leading that charge of custom content being this massive factor that people were, unfortunately, in certain cases, only looking at for the first time.
Yeah, Matt, how have you seen, sort of the shift in your process in the last 6 months or so? I mean, how have things sort of navigated into a different sort of parallel universe?
Yeah, I was gonna say the before times, aka before COVID, BC. No, I just to mirror what JC was saying, I totally agree. Right, you were already starting to see in 2020 a lot of widespread adoption of influencer campaigns after 10 years of beating the drum of, hey, this is the campaigns of the future. This is a way to get your product, your messaging, what have you, to a more curated, more targeted audience on, through a voice that they trust and that they know, and create really exciting partnerships. You are starting to see that really happen. And of course, when COVID hit, you saw a contraction of the market because everyone starts to, stuff the dollars into their mattresses to batten down the hatches. But, as things have progressed, as things have slowly gotten better, but as media content hasn't really hit, full steam ahead again, it's one of those things that you're starting to see a lot of, like JC mentioned, those traditional brands having to just go with the times and say, hey, we have this ad spend. We need to get our products off shelves at some point here. Where can we spend? Let's actually try this influencer thing that we've heard about for so long. And so I think COVID, had this interesting effect where it kind of forced the industry forward and force some of those slower adopters to start experimenting in the space much sooner than they otherwise would have, which, and hopefully they're having a good experience. It seems like, they've seen a lot of value here, and, it kind of helps bolster this whole ecosystem.
Yeah, it kind of felt like there was, the cannon was loaded, the fuse was ready, and all it needed was to be lit, and that pressure to just push a lot of that out. Let's talk about, your new channel. Congrats on, some, great traction in just 1 month,
Thank
1.5
you.
million subscribers on the Food Theorists. What's it been like launching a new channel in the midst of a pandemic? You find that there's a much bigger demand for content like that right now?
How it's been is exhausting. Anytime you launch a new channel is always going to be exhausting.
Sure.
But I will say, on the plus side, it's been great to just get outside, like have a new project to focus on and work on, and get us back to normalcy, or at least a sense of normalcy, where it gives us something to focus on that isn't, the world events and, what's going on. So that's been a nice distraction and something that's helped move the business forward. And I will say it's something that's been in the works for years, right? So even though the launch is happening during COVID, it's one of those things that JC can attest, we've been talking about for the better part of 2.5 years. And because there's fewer in-person meetings, because there's fewer live events to go to, fan meetups, things like that, it's really given us the chance to dive in, look at our own processes, optimize those, and also get the time to really dig into the larger scale projects that we've had cooking in the back burner for a while. But now, hey, here's our chance to really execute on it and capitalize on, like you alluded to, the demand in the market. Food Theory is just very fortunately timed where, with COVID, you are seeing a big push towards content that's around the kitchen, content that's back in the home space, because that's where people are right now. And so that's why you saw the sourdough bread trend take off. That's why you're seeing a lot of like cook with me, cooking optimizations, SEO for anything cooking or kitchen related has really skyrocketed in the last few months if you look at Google Trends. And so Food Theory really slots nicely into that audience interest that's already there. And also, like you said, right now, because there is no, not a whole lot of fresh content rolling off the shelves. There's, no real new movies to take audience attention away, things like that. Digital is the one place where creators are able to basically continue on largely untouched from where they were before. Certainly, you've seen content creators have to pivot a little bit, have to get a little bit more creative in the content that they're releasing, who they're doing it with, things like that. But largely, we are still able to produce the content that our audiences are expecting on the regular cadence that they were expecting it. And
Oh, sorry, Matt. It looks like your mic cut out. These things happen when you go live. I'm going to throw a question to John really quick while you figure that out. No problem. John, let's talk a little bit about like the gaming ecosystem right now. Obviously, gaming is having a massive moment, and again, this is one of those things that like it already was. But just like influencer marketing, it's like the complex gaming entertainment industry has been growing rapidly over the last couple of years, and it's vastly complex for brands. What's your advice to brands looking to get involved in that space?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I heard that's most interesting within the last year or so is that gaming as an industry makes more than movies and music combined. Like that's something that years ago, if you ever told people that was going to be what's going to happen, they would have called you crazy. But it's just become so ubiquitous to who we are as a society. And if somebody says they're not a gamer, I think that's a boring person, because you have to do things that are exciting to you. You have to do things that are fun and playful. And video games are just the way for us to be able to do that in a communal way now. So part of working within the gaming industry and working with people who are creating gaming style content is understanding the community that you're talking to, as opposed to just thinking, oh, I am advertising alongside this game, things of that nature. It's really, who are the people that are embracing this game, and think about why they're embracing it as well.
Matt, we're jumping in with both feet on the gaming conversation right
Sure.
now. Talking a little bit about, obviously food's having a moment, so you've got a great channel for that, and gaming is just continually going to grow, and again, one of these sort of cannonballs in the cannon that was just ready to pop. What do you think is happening right now in terms of, from your neck of the woods, like where gaming is going, especially related to COVID?
Yeah, absolutely. So one thing that immediately jumps to mind is how you're seeing this explosive growth in more of the casual gaming market and games that are more attuned to a wider gameplay audience, people who might have not picked up a game in a long time or had been gaming adjacent for a while, but are now just starting to experiment in the space. You've seen things like Minecraft, where they've recreated full college campuses in order to recreate the graduation ceremony that they weren't able to have, or the Monterey Bay Aquarium recreate itself in Animal Crossing, so that way they can still invite guests in to teach them of all things aquatic, things like that, which is really exciting. And I think what you're starting to see is, yes, games are still serving the purpose they always have, which is entertainment, distraction, fun, but you're also seeing them as virtual worlds for the first time. And I think that's what you're starting to see, that transition in people's minds, that they're not just fun and games, they're places where I can be myself or participate as a part of a community in a safe virtual environment when the outside world isn't providing that to me anymore. And so that's why a lot of those open world games, those kind of like more creatively focused games where it's less about like platforming and being the best and getting to number one or nailing the headshot, but instead it's about like Animal Crossing, living your day-to-day life, decorating your space, going about your routine with friends. Minecraft, same thing. It's what you make it to be. That's why you're seeing those games really get this broad appeal, and you're starting to see what it means to be a gamer really broaden outward. And then similar to that, right now the hottest game is Fall Guys, which is a battle royale, a genre that is typically for hardcore gamers because it's 100 people battling it out to be number one. But in actuality, this game it's like Mario Party. It's fun. You can pick it up and play and laugh about how you fail, but at the same time, you might just get lucky enough to make it a few rounds in. And I think that sort of escapist, gaming for everyone's type of mentality is what's really helped gaming really capture the attention of people and the attention of markets right now.
Yeah, John, we talked previously on other streams about, the difference between, obviously there's a great difference between what's considered esports, what's considered casual gaming. What would you say to brands who are looking to enter the space? That's sort of one of the first jumping off points in sort of the complexities of the gaming industry, is sort of the difference between competitive esports and the casual gamer. How would you breach that topic with a brand looking to partner?
Yeah, I mean, I think it really comes down to knowing the audience that you're intending to target and understanding where that audience actually lives within the gaming sphere. Are you looking for somebody who is, fiercely competitive? You're probably not going to want to advertise on somebody who's doing Animal Crossing videos. The two just don't coincide with each other. Are you somebody that there's going to be a higher likelihood for conversion if you're advertising over mobile games? Maybe you are a mobile app yourself. You might not want to go to somebody who's doing Call of Duty, but maybe Call of Duty mobile becomes the right fit for you. So it's really understanding who your target is and where they're actually living, and also not being afraid to experiment. I think that's, one of the things for esports being so young in the wider zeitgeist right now is a lot of people don't really know the full audience of it. So you may find a cohort that you've never tried before that might be super responsive to your product as well.
Right. Let's turn the shift back to a little bit more towards influencer marketing right now. Matt, I know you've partnered with plenty of brands, and it's a regular part of your process. Let's talk a little bit about your audience reception over the last couple of years. I think that there was a period in which audience, followers kind of had a misunderstanding of what that was, and it feels like they've kind of come full circle, and they understand that it's really the way that influencers make their living in a big sense. Talk a little bit about what it's like for you working with sponsored posts and content that involves brands.
Yeah, absolutely. So you're totally right. In the early days of digital content creation, it was a big faux pas for you to accept any sort of brand sponsorship money. Saying hashtag ad, hashtag spawn, or this episode was brought to you by brand X immediately put a red flag on that piece of content. Immediately the audience is like, oh, you're such a sellout, because they didn't understand what it meant to take brand sponsorship, that a lot of creators are carefully curating who they're choosing to partner with, things like that. Fast forward, say 10 years in the ecosystem, and now it's almost been a complete 180, where you see the fan bases actively petitioning on the creator's behalf to get them sponsored by Wendy's or Diet Coke or, you know, Abercrombie and Fitch or whatever that like person's personal kind of like white whale of brand is. And you actively see creators talking about kind of what their aspirational brand partnerships are, right? So we've made no small deal about the fact that we'd love to work with Diet Coke at some day. And our audience very actively will harass Diet Coke's social media campaigns to be like, hey, show some love to MatPat, who's been a big supporter for years. And what happens is when those brand partnerships do eventually come, it's not just a victory from, you know, the brand side, it's not just a victory for the creator, but it's a victory for the whole community, because they felt like they were a part of that story. They felt like they helped make that happen. And instead of being a sellout, now it's like, this is a win for all of us. We're being noticed, we're being respected, we're being called out by big company X. That's really cool. We are legit. And similar to what we were talking about earlier before my mic cut out with COVID, is COVID has really kind of accelerated that process even more, where now an increased volume of brand sponsorships is actually more acceptable in the audience's viewpoint too, because they understand ad revenue is dipped, nothing new is going on. And so I recognize that my favorite creator probably has to accept this brand deal because, you know, it's allowing them to keep producing the content. And they're providing me a valuable service by giving me, you know, the normal escapism that they usually provide, or the normal entertainment that they normally provide. So that brand is enabling my favorite creator to kind of keep me in a positive mental state. And so all ships are rising here. So yes, go for it, accept that brand sponsorship, keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah,
I think,
add
go
to
ahead, John.
that's something that I actually bring up when I'm in calls with brands, talking to them, not even about specific creators, but just getting them to embrace the idea of creators doing custom content for them. Part of that has come from the honest and open relationship that people like Matt have had with their audience, where it's not always necessarily about doing the game theory. It's saying, this is how we operate as a business. And there are certain things that in this world are not always dependable. YouTube ad rates fluctuate throughout time. When there's an adpocalypse, that affects your ability to, you know, pay for your researchers and your editors and stuff like that. And when a brand comes in and is a fit because you're not going to pair with somebody you don't think your audience is going to appreciate, and it enables you to keep creating more content, not just for that single video, but to make sure that your team is able to go on and the channel is able to continue producing quality. Like, the audience appreciates that because of that personal connection versus, you know, the traditional TV model. Yes, you know in the back of your head that it exists, but there's not a dialogue there at this point.
There's, you know, been, you know, an increasing need for brands to, you know, rally behind, you know, not just to be opportunists around social causes, but to genuinely support them and do those things that, you know, it's not just about what they say in their 30-second spot, but it's about the people that they endorse. It's about the things that they do in the real world, the things that they give back on, and that people don't even see. You know, can you talk a little bit about that, about like authentic partnerships, brands that, you know, are there certain brands that you wouldn't work with, or are there certain brands that, you know, you'd like to work with that, you know, that support you in the ways that, you know, you'd like to be supported?
Yeah, so the one thing that I would say out of kind of like the first half of your question is, well, yes, now is a time for brands to show the good work that they're doing and, you know, show that they're supportive of societal movements and changes that are happening, you know, both in like public health sphere, but also in kind of like societal equal rights changes. It's a tricky needle to thread. And I think it's one of those things that it's very easy to see the trending hashtags right now of COVID, stay at home, Black Lives Matter, what have, I mean, you name them, there's a lot going on right now. And for a brand to say, we have to be there, we have to be a part of that conversation, our ad has to be a part of this, otherwise we're missing the boat and all these other brands are going to pass us. It's tricky though, because you have to strike the right balance. It has to be because you authentically support that cause, and because you're adding value to what that cause represents, you understand it, and you have a history of supporting it in the past, rather than, you know, I'm hopping onto this because it's an opportunistic period for me, right? And the audiences are incredibly attuned to that sort of thing. They can tell when you're just there because you want to ride the hashtag and get a couple extra retweets versus, you know, when you're there authentically. And, you know, the risk that comes with being on the wrong side of that conversation is far more detrimental than, you know, the added bump that you get the week that that hashtag is trending or whatever. So that's the one watch out that I would have during this period if I were talking to brands who are thinking about like participating in some of these societal trends, is just make sure that you have the reputation to back it up, and make sure that you're comfortable letting the issue stand on its own, and, you know, you're contributing to that and boosting awareness of the message, rather than trying to insert your branded message over top of, you know, what the actual push or hashtag represents.
Right. John, you have any thoughts on that as well?
Yeah, I think Matt like really hit it on the head there. You know, if you're going to put something out at the start of the BLM movement, and it's, yes, it is the right thing to do, but if all of a sudden 2 months later you go back to a Instagram feed of zero representation and it becomes completely whitewashed to what it was prior to BLM, the audience is going to call BS on that, and there's no way they're not going to. So yes, get the short benefit if you're going to do the longer term commitment. I think that's the thing, is the audience doesn't want you to just jump in because it's fashionable. The audience is actually going to use it against you in the future if you try to make any other movement for social change. They're just going to think you're jumping on every bandwagon possible, as opposed to making it a true commitment. And it can't just be what is public facing. They also need to know that internally as a company, you're doing that as well. It's not about what your Instagram feed says if your Glassdoor says something completely different.
Yeah, that's true. The other thing that I would say too is for brands to remember where the audience is at right now. And I think that's something that digital creators are really attuned to, that sometimes when you're a brand and more separated away from the audiences that you're trying to talk to, it's easy to forget, right? Like, because of COVID, a huge number of people are out of work and are having to accept unemployment. They've been furloughed, they've been laid off, their companies are going under, their small business has had to shut its doors because of rent costs or something like that. Because of Black Lives Matter, you have a lot of people who are finally, you know, feeling heard for the first time, or finally, you know, having their the strife that they've had to go through finally be talked about in a public forum, which is empowering but also painful. They're out in the streets protesting, which is, you know, exhausting mentally and physically. And even, you know, the COVID, it's people are stuck in their homes trying to achieve a sense of normalcy, but it's depressing, it's hard, it is mentally taxing for you to have to adjust to what is this new world order for the foreseeable future, right? And so I think that's the other thing that brands wanting to partner with digital creators, or just any sort of ad campaign right now, need to keep in mind is, what is the headspace of the audience that they're looking to target, and how can they as a brand help in some way? How is their message, their ad dollars, what have you, going to contribute or add to that audience's needs in that moment? That's why you're seeing, you know, such explosive growth of channels like Mr. Beast, who was already doing so great, but his entire model is giving back, you know, providing for homeless shelters, adopting puppies, giving food to food banks. Like, he embodies what it means to kind of be a brand at this time when so many people find themselves in need. It's, hey, I'm taking my platform and the money that your viewership, your sponsorships, your merch purchases, what have you, are delivering me, and I'm giving it back to you because I, as a creator, recognize I'm in a special place and I can, help you in whatever small way I can to get through it. It's also why you see the pushback against a bunch of celebrities singing Imagine All the People, because, oh yeah, this will make everyone feel good to see us in our, COVID-free neighborhoods or whatever, sing on our expensive iPhones or whatever. And of course, that gets pushback because it's tone deaf. And again, if you're a brand looking to participate in the space right now, managing what that tone is and understanding what people need to hear right now and how you can fit into it is the kind of balance that you have to strike.
Yeah, and one more thing to add to that. I mean, you mentioned Mr. Beast, and if you're going to be working with creators towards a good cause and towards a charity and such, figuring out who the people who've historically been a part of those is incredibly important too. Because if you have somebody who has, I don't want to call it been selfish, but maybe just not a part of the conversation, and all of a sudden they're doing this massive push towards a charity, it's going to have a different reception versus somebody like Mr. Beast, who's been involved in tons of different give back and charity scenarios. Matt, what you do with St. Jude's, I believe it is,
Yep.
You do your charity run with them, Rooster Teeth and what they've done with Extra Life. Like,
amazing, yeah.
the audiences are going to know, oh yeah, if you're partnering with one of these creators in this cause, it makes sense because they've been doing this for years. It's not just somebody who's doing it because it's the right time to do it.
Yeah.
Right, absolutely. And a lazy attempt at authenticity can often come off as the most inauthentic. So endorsing a creator who's really doing the hard work, I think is a great move. And even beyond social causes, right now there's so much production that's just not happening, or is happening in a totally different way than it was before. I think that there might be a misconception that YouTubers have nothing's changed for you, but that's probably not true. So Matt, how has your production sort of been affected by all of this? There's a lot that I'm sure you've changed in the last couple of months.
Fortunately, we were already in a largely remote situation. A lot of our work is done in post-production. A lot of our work is already done via Google Hangouts, meetings, things like that. And so, yes, COVID did change a little bit of what we had to do. I'd say, if we were 75% remote before, I'd say we're probably like 95% remote at this point. And it's kind of pushed us to optimize a lot of those pipelines a lot more. A couple extra Google Hangouts a week, certainly, to make sure that everyone's
Sure.
not just mentally okay, but moving forward with whatever projects are at hand. But we were kind of in the fortunate position to already be in that ecosystem. You have a lot of like original YouTube channels, massive YouTube channels, like Good Mythical Morning, who is Mythical Entertainment, which is 100-person company, massive, with Smosh and their 3 or 4 channels, podcasts, brand extensions, just a massive team around them, who I think only now are just starting to be able to get back into the studios. And of course, then with the requisite limited production crew. Fine Brothers, was a 100+ person company. And again, as soon as quarantines happen, things have to immediately shift and change. Even vloggers, who are used to working alongside their crews and have their buddies around them to do, whatever crazy stunts or things that they have going on, have had to rethink how to produce their content in order to kind of work with kind of the new world order as it exists. So it's definitely changed how people have had to do their productions, but not necessarily in a bad way. The cool thing that we've seen, and we've seen it on our end, a lot of other creators that we know and talk to have seen it on their ends too, the audience is more accepting of trying different content formats right now. And again, this goes to that idea of creators are providing a service to their audiences where, hey, you're providing me new content, you're providing me a sense of stability and consistency. You're doing these weekly uploads, you're still doing them. They might not look exactly the same, but you're still doing them, and I appreciate that. And because the audience kind of understands how the world has changed and how there have to be special considerations, you have things like the Try Guys, who are, their entire brand is going out and doing exciting things. Now all their stuff has to be home-centric, kitchen-centric. Let's redo cooking challenges. Let's do small things with our wives or things like that. And it's definitely not as big or grandiose as their videos usually are, but the audience is still there for it, and they're accepting it because they're accepting, they understand, and it's allowing them to test out new formats, new avenues, new show ideas that they wouldn't get to test out otherwise, and the audience can, either accept it, which it seems like they are, and maybe that becomes a format moving forward, which is exciting, or maybe it was a temporary thing and it gets washed away. But now is an exciting time as a creator to start experimenting and trying new things.
Yeah, I would also add, an experienced and professional creator is nothing if not nimble. Like what we've been seeing, there are different ways that things need to happen. Like for example, if you're working with a gaming company right now, you used to be invited to an event where you would get to go and play the game in person in advance. And it was a protective measure. Nothing could get leaked if you're going to a room, plugging in your laptop, you're recording all your footage, and then it goes straight to your your editor. Right. Now, because everything is either being shipped and remotely recorded using different tools, things have to adjust. Production timelines have to adjust. Instead of it being something where, Matt and his editor could start literally editing it on a flight home. Right. Now it's, okay, we have 2 days to ship this overnight to get to you. And there's only a 5-day timeline before this embargo happens. Like those are all things that have changed in there. I think in addition to like the lifestyle vloggers, like that's a massive one, because part of what they did is going out and being in the world and having this exciting life. It's like, okay, what are the aspects of your personality now that can overpower the spot where it used to just be, I'm going to cool places. Now it's, I might not be able to go to the cool places, but I'm still a cool person that you enjoy who I am. The other one that still stands out to me, and I know it's only a niche group of creators within gaming, but the gaming squads who all would record in a single room for their Let's Play, now needing to do that remotely has tons of issues that wouldn't have been expected, like footage being lost, something messed up in the transfer, somebody's webcam doesn't record right. And normally if you have everybody doing that in person, you're able to fix it on the spot and troubleshoot, versus if you've done a 45 to minute long recording, or sorry, hour long recording, and then all of a sudden the footage for one of your 6 players is gone, it's just straight up gone, and you need to be able to work with what you have. You're not going to take another 6 hours of manpower to re-record that and start it from scratch. And also, anybody who's ever done a Let's Play can tell you, if you do one and then you try to recreate those moments or even the jokes, it just comes across as the fakest thing. And I've seen it tried, it just does not work.
Yeah, that's tricky when things, it's tricky, especially with collaboration. There's so many people that work together in person, and you're right. There's an added amount of complication. It adds extra time and extra cost when, suddenly you have all these unknowns, that you have to deal with at every corner of the road. But there's also something to be said about the nature of the content when you can create stuff week by week and really play out your daily life. Obviously it's great that, there's new shows that are coming out on Netflix, there's stuff in the can, but a lot of that stuff doesn't really relate too much to the way of life for people right now. Right. It's nice to have a new season of Umbrella Academy. Like, that's great. It's a nice escapism or whatever, but but it's not the nature of how life is right now. I think there's something to be said about creators who are able to sort of speak to their audience and kind of unify around this thing that sort of brings people together. So Matt, are you noticing that kind of shift in your content, that like, you're able to go a layer deeper with your audience because there's this thing that everybody has going on at the same time?
Well, I think that's always been one of the X factors that's gone underappreciated, or at least under talked about when it comes to digital content creation, right? Mm-hmm. Where, like you said, if you're doing Umbrella Academy, that's a year plus production in the process, crossing hundreds of hands, dozens of months, multiple different locations before finally those 8, 10, 12 episodes are fit to air. Whereas, if you're a digital content creator, some people work 6 months out and batch shoot a bunch of things, but most, if not all, content creators are also mixing in that timely, relevant content that is of the week, of the minute. Let's talk about the current memes, the current trends, the current news stories, things like that. And because of that, it does feel more relevant and more of the moment to what an audience is experiencing at any given point in time. And so yeah, whereas a lot of the productions that have been in the can and are slowly being rolled out now are nice to have and are those nice distractions, they do feel that sort of distance. And I think that is why you're seeing digital content creators being able to thrive in this environment, because they are able to speak about like, hey, I'm so sick of staying indoors. I know you guys are too. We're getting through this together. And that's a message that no other entertainment medium is able to deliver in such an authentic, organic way, because the content creator is actually feeling that way. It's also one of those things too, where in a fascinating twist, right, you're seeing traditional media, certain genres of it, have to really adopt the YouTuber mantle, what it means to be a digital content creator. The late night shows are the best example of this, right? Where all of a sudden, literally overnight, production shuts down and Colbert and Kimmel and Fallon are doing it with their families in their living room. And what we've seen, and we've actually done an episode of Film Theory about this, where we looked into the numbers, we analyzed all of their channels' performance, both before COVID, when the shutdowns happened, and then also when they started to kind of find their rhythm with the daily distancing shows and the at-home productions and things like that, that those who have adopted the YouTuber mindset have really thrived on YouTube. So the kind of far and away winner is Trevor Noah and his daily distancing show, where if you look at him, he's taken the YouTuber 101 to 301 course, basically. Like, his video looks like a traditional YouTube comedy vlog from like 2012, 2014, right? Where it's fast jump cuts that are making the jokes, it's added graphics to emphasize, you know, punchlines, it's sound effects, things like that, that are part of the cultural vernacular of YouTube, right? You're speaking the lingo of the platform that this is airing on and that people are watching it on. And as a result, his viewership and his subscribership has actually really thrived in a period where some of these other personalities have struggled to kind of maintain a level of viewership or a level of consistent subscribership because they're out of their element and the production isn't really supporting them in a similar way. And so I think the general message there is always being sure that the medium that you're that the message that you're making is fitting the medium that you're distributing it on, and those late shows are a great example of that.
Yeah, going back to the kickoff with the Umbrella Academy example, I think that one ended up being a little more timely than they even probably would have intended for a few reasons. One being fighting against the end of the world. There ended up being a lot about just kind of racial injustice, which they wouldn't have been that attuned when creating it, that was going to be such a hot topic at this time. But there is definitely an escapism. It also helped that it took place in like the 60s too. But there's an escapism when you go into that. And I think, creators doing stuff that is very timely and in the modern day are also walking this really fine line. Like, it's appropriate to reference when things in your life are being affected by COVID. I know, Matt, in some of your content, you were careful to actually say COVID in certain theories because of the way the YouTube algorithm responded to it and things of that nature.
Yeah.
You use that great Dr. Mario germ graphic to fill in for some of it. But there's also a really important balance too, because if you as a creator and or a brand working with a creator focus too much on it, it could be more of a downer and not that uplifting message. There is an ad I hear on a regular basis, and I'm not going to call it out, but they constantly bring up what 2020 has been, and they don't make the direct reference, but it's something that every time I hear it, and it's a media unit I hear really, really often, and it has turned me off from that brand. Like, I got it for a little while, but then when it's literally being pounded almost daily to probably my ad servers that are targeting me from every algorithm, I can't keep hearing that and stay interested in that brand either.
Yeah, it's actually really true. And I think JC brings up a really good point here, which is at a certain point, you do have to move away from the current trends and just move on with life, right? And I think that, and maybe not move on, but like move your content on with life. It's easy to get mired in the like, well, it's just more of the same, and like, let's look at the numbers again, and oh, we're still stuck inside. And you did see, like, with us and kind of listening to our audience, we saw that there was a turning point where they kind of got sick of the COVID jokes or oh, we're still stuck indoors, guys. Like at a certain point, it just, like John mentioned, you just get tired of it. You just don't want to think about it anymore. And this piece of content that you're watching online, you don't want it to bring it up because it's already so prevalent everywhere around you all the time, 24/7. And so I think you did see a moment where, like, obviously all content creators were talking about it because it was super prevalent in everyone's minds, but the audience pushback and the creator just wanting to move on have kind of pushed that content train forward. And sure, every once in a while you drop in like, hey, still stuck inside, or like, 2020, huh? But, you know, just to acknowledge that, hey, we're still in this. We recognize that this is still a thing, but it's not like beat you over the head with, you know, the messaging anymore. It's like, we're still here, we're still getting through it together, but like, let's focus on what's to come.
Right, right. Well, as we're wrapping up, let's, you know, what's going on in the future for game theorists? I mean, fill us in on, you know, what you're looking at in the months ahead. What's exciting?
So for us, you know, Q4 is always a big time where we double up all our productions. So we really ramp up a lot of things. We'll see. It's interesting. Like, there's console launches happening, but you know, with the state of the industry where it is, with film industry being where it is, we've been digging into a lot of evergreen stuff, which is great, and it's given us a chance to look back at things that we weren't able to cover before, or topics that we always wanted to, but there was always something more trendy to talk about. But we are eager to get to new stuff, just hopefully that new stuff is happening. But for us, you know, more food theory down the line. We're super excited about how that's been going. It's been a lot of fun. It's been a creative breath of fresh air for all of us. And seeing the audience adoption of it and being excited about it has been so heartening in what has been otherwise been just a crushing year. So that's been really great. We are doing more work with St. Jude this year, and so that's been kind of a year-long project with them, which has been awesome. And yeah, we still have a fourth quadrant of our logo that we need to fill in at some point. So, you know, as we're stuck indoors, we're still working on some of those larger scale projects, but you know, when they roll out is probably 2021. So a lot of work going into stuff that will happen probably next year.
Is that fourth quadrant going to be blue? That's my prediction for that.
It's absolutely going to be blue. Yeah.
Perfect.
It might blue, or it might be pink.
Okay.
It might be. We'll see.
Any hints on what subject that might be?
It's going to be blue or pink. We'll see. That's your hint.
Okay, good. Good to know. Good to know.
Here's your other hint. It's something that you can do without getting just flagged up the wazoo by copyright claims and you know, sporting networks, which, let's be honest, eliminates a pretty big chunk of possibilities.
We'll leave it at that. All right, sounds good. Thank you guys so much. If you're just joining us or you missed a portion of this stream, fear not. We'll post it on YouTube tomorrow. You can find that on BrandStorytelling.tv. Thank you, John Carl. Thank you, Matthew Patrick. I appreciate you guys joining me.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Stay safe, everyone.
You too. Be well.